I think this is recording. Hello there and welcome to my second CQRS video. I'm not sure if you've watched the first one, but I did one about how you can replay events to build up another read model or a query side as such. I did enjoy recording it and it sort of opened my eyes. Not sure it really brings value to anyone else, but I thought I would record myself coding a new aggregate. So I'm coding this application called Full Rent, which is going to make renting properties in the UK easier for landlords and make renting for tenants a lot easier. There's a lot of products in America, but in the UK, not so many. Different laws in the UK. I think it's a bit of a niche market. Anyway, that's not really the point. The point is I need an application. This is the tenant applying to a landlord for screening, in effect. I'm going to call it an application. There will be many steps involved. So I'm going to code this as a new aggregate. I think it sort of doesn't belong in the property aggregate, even though it is sort of primarily linked to the property. But I feel its own aggregate root is sort of the best way to go. So I'll go into my source folder I've got here and create an application. Already exists. Oh, I must have already made it. What an idiot. It's interesting when you get into DDD that stuff like application, that is the name of sort of the domain where there's already an app folder in Laravel. It's like the whole event thing. So a property event, for example, what type of event is that? Is that like a system event, or is that actually sort of mapping the real world? Anyway, so I suppose the simplest thing is an application has an application class, which is fairly simple. Now this is going to be event sourced like everything else, so I sort of find it easier to make the event first, so I'll have an events folder and we will create the first event. Interesting, what should I call this? Should have thought about this before I recorded, and I should know the domain better really. Started application. Yeah, I think so. Started application. It's very simple. Because the application has so many steps, the first event that constructs it will be incredibly simple. There will be some value objects in here. The first of all is going to be the application ID. Now I've been putting these in a folder called value objects for each aggregate. I'm not sure if it's a good idea. One of my aggregates has a lot of value objects and the folder was getting full, so I decided to just go for this separate folder. So application ID, and if we just extend UUID identity, that pulls in all the stuff that generates UUIDs and stuff like that, and it implements a identity. And that's pretty much this class done. Very simple. So that is going to be our first parameter, application ID. Application ID. The next thing is the property. I should probably make all the value objects in the same case, in the same time. This is where I'm not entirely sure how this works. So property ID is going to be another value object. Now there is obviously a property ID in the property aggregate. Should it be the same class? You know, it both represents the same thing. However, they're in different aggregates. I'm not entirely sure what the best thing to do. I've been doing it this way, so when you look at the namespacing in one aggregate, there's no sort of cross-contamination as such. import class, import class. So I'm not sure. Feedback would be good. User ID. It's not user. The tenant. But is it a tenant they're applying? Applicant ID. Is that spelt right? We'll soon find out. Yeah, no. I don't know. Can't spell this. 1 second. Google search applicant. This is my day. Applicant. That sort of makes sense. We shall rename this. Sorry about that. I can't spell. It's embarrassing. Is it still moaning about that? What's wrong with that spelling? Oh, makes more sense. I think we're back on the road now. For some reason it's not doing that one. Anyway, again, just a bit of copy and pasting. Import. So there's some danger to be had with copy and paste, but yeah. The last thing is a timestamp for when the applicant or application started. Say started date time, and this will just extend date time. I have one for rent. Cannot inherit for a final class. That's because it's in the wrong place, is it not? I don't know why that is final. What did I do else? Oh no, elsewhere I didn't bother. That's why. I didn't bother with this value object. I didn't think it was necessary. I don't think it's necessary here. I can just in here not use it. So ID, property ID, gotta make sure I get the right one, and date time, started at. I can, if I ever have to version this, I can sort of trick my way into building a value object and then using the default date time as the seed value as such, and do a bit of PHP Storm magic. So here is our event. To store in the event store, we obviously have to be able to serialize. So we'll just add the serializable interface, which I'm using from the Broadway package. Add the method stub. Just leave those there for now. So the application, quite simple. Pretty much takes what this constructor is here, these variables here. So we will have a static method or static function as such. Start application takes these parameters, which I'll need to import or copy and paste from here. You know, it's pretty much the same as that event. Now we don't actually need the time for start of that. So I can just sort of default it in here. So we will then do this apply, which it will moan about for a minute. New start application. ID, applicant ID, property ID, date, time, now. Because we're applying now. In the future, if this date time isn't going to be now, and we need to make a application with a date time that's different, we can always change this. It's not going to break, and make sure we return the application. This extends event source aggregate root, which requires this method stub get aggregate ID, which returns a string. So we just need to do return application, and then we'll add a string of this application ID. Now we haven't got that parameter, that property yet, but we'll code it. The reason for the prefixing of the aggregate ID with application is to allow the event store to sort by category. That way when I load stuff out, I can sort of load the user aggregate or the application aggregate, meaning that if I do a change I don't need to load all events to be able to rebuild. It's just sort of like an event type. It does prefix everything with that. See, the event store uses projections to make new streams, and there is one projection that takes the first bit in front of a slash, or a dash I mean, to sort into different categories. Quite useful. Anyway, what's this moaning about? This, that's why. We can't access this, it's an application. Anyway, so we will have a method called protected function apply started application, and that takes the event started application. I should probably give it a variable started application, and in here we will go this application ID equals start application get. Did we add a get? Must be getters. No, I didn't put any getters in. What an idiot. Getters done. Now I can be quite lazy and just copy these across because it's the first one and I need them. Saves me a bit of typing. Application ID. Applicant ID will start. Applicant ID. Started at equals start application get started at. Done. Now I suppose this is the thing to note about event sourcing. This is the method that is called when we are running the events into this aggregate. This code can never fail. It has to run. It can't throw an exception or anything like that. In the start application we could throw an exception. Now in this case there is sort of very little domain logic to listen to, other than sort of the wrong parameters or something like that. This function is sort of unlikely to fail. Now if we look in properties, you will see we've got our applies here that just apply some simple some attributes, sets them. But the accept applications, which is sort of a method we call remotely, first of all checks to see if we're already accepting applicants. If we are, we throw an exception saying property already accepting applications. we wouldn't allow that to be fired twice. And the same goes for the closed. Now once we've gone past this error checking or behaviour, we then apply the event. When the event is applied, there is sort of no going back. When I did write one of these wrong, I did end up with a load of closed application events in the event store, which in theory you shouldn't be able to close it twice, but when I rerun from the event store, I end up running them all in order, and it doesn't fail. It can't fail because it's already set to false. It has to sort of run. So I suppose it's something to consider. Anyway, slightly off topic. So we now have this application. It's probably a good time to write a test, I suppose. I'm not sure what your viewpoint is on domain-driven development, test-driven development even. I'm not sold. Never really done it, so extends test case. We should put the slash. There we go. So public function test creating the application. What am I doing? Application equals new, no application, start application, ID, random, might as well just all be random in these, applicant, cannot spell that word, can I? ID, random, property, ID, got to be careful to get the right one, that one, random, and that's it. I was going to say it looked like it fitted, but it didn't. This sort of demonstrates something interesting, I find. So the applicant ID is exactly the same as a user ID or a tenant ID, but you can see in this sort of aggregate that the correct name for the person would be sort of an applicant, not a user. The business wouldn't use the word user for someone coming into the office. Now, this demonstrates the consistency. We can always guarantee the consistency in a aggregate. So this application, we can't guarantee it across many applications, or we can't guarantee from within this aggregate this property ID is valid, as in it actually exists in the system. That's where the read model has to come in. This is where sort of eventual consistency issues can arise. Not that I found any sort of showstoppers, but outside of this aggregate is when I need to check that this property ID is actually valid. So this aggregate doesn't care. As long as it gets a valid property ID, it's not going to moan. Okay, and we should test how many events are fired. That's always a good thing. Events. Okay, I remember now. Events equals this. Events application. That just gets the events out of the application for me. If we look in this code, quite simple. Just get uncommitted events and get the iterator. Check correct events. That's a useful class. Anyway, so we should check that. Pound sign. I'm that British. Count events equals 1, and we should. I've got this method called check correct events. It's going to take the event stream. It's going to take a key which will be 0. I think I should do a +1 on that just to make it a bit easier. Not sure. Might trip over it later. And we should have start application class. because that is the event we are checking that exists. Now hopefully when I run my unit tests we get a pass, which is a relief. So we know now that when we do an application and we start one, we get an aggregate root which has one event which is of type start application. I suppose this is probably enough for one talk or ramble, which is what these are turning into. But this demonstrates that when we do start application on an application, one event gets fired. Now when I pass this to the event store, that can handle the saving. That's where I will actually have to code in these serialize and deserialize. I should test these in another test to make sure that this event performs consistently. I have made mistakes in the deserializer which throw errors which you don't notice until you obviously do a read out of the event store. Anyway, any questions or comments or naming or anything like that, or just to laugh at my dyslexia, leave a comment or tweet me.